Welcome to the JFK Assassination, Do the Math, Part 9. Okay, so who did it? Who were the conspirators? Who were the assassins? To find out, one only has to look at things logically. If you want to murder someone and get away with it, all you have to do is figure out a way to fool the local police or sheriff. It isn't easy, but it isn't impossible either. But if you want to murder a sitting president, then you have to figure out a way to fool the FBI and the CIA. And that isn't just difficult, that is impossible. And yes, the CIA has no jurisdiction within the U.S., but they would still investigate to see if there was any foreign involvement, especially if the prime suspect was someone like Oswald, a communist who lived in the Soviet Union for several years. Okay, you say, then why isn't Oswald the assassin as the FBI said? Because the math says the Oswald theory is not just wrong, it's impossible. Plus, it just isn't possible that the FBI and the CIA could have gotten the trajectory of every bullet wrong. That's crazy, you say. That means that J. Edgar Hoover was involved. It is impossible that someone of J. Edgar Hoover's stature could do this. After all, his job was to fight crime. Well, let's take a look at J. Edgar Hoover, then director of the FBI for life, and see if it is possible. J. Edgar was a notorious red-baiter and McCarthyite. These are names for those in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s dedicated to ending the horrible threat of communism by lying and persecuting innocent people, which in reality meant they just wanted to control the population by anger and fear. Kind of like today over Islamic terrorists, only worse. Plus, J. Edgar was a cold-blooded killer. What? You scream? Take a look at the end of the movie Public Enemy. The night Dillinger was killed, there were enough FBI agents in front and back of him to arrest him without a fight. Yet one FBI agent, when Dillinger was completely stopped, walked up behind him and killed him with a single shot to the back of the head. J. Edgar Hoover had become judge and jury and ordered the execution. At that point, J. Edgar Hoover was no different than any mafia godfather. He alone decided who was guilty and if and how the guilty person should be killed. It's just a tiny step from that to kill the President of the United States. And that tiny step was easier to take when the justification was to save all of America from the scourge of communism. Okay, then who pulled the trigger? J. Edgar? No, but the answer is the easy part of all this. Members of the CIA. What, you exclaim? Listen, there is one statement that makes the CIA the logical choice for the ones who pulled the trigger. And that statement is, the CIA is a totally secret organization that answers to no one. When the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, asked the CIA to report on operations conducted in the 1950s and 1960s that they had failed to report on before, the head of the CIA just said no. The people, as in of the people, by the people, and for the people, do not have the right to know what the CIA did. And that's still true today. They can kidnap any American citizen, take them to Eastern Europe, beat that person to death, cremate the body, and scatter the ashes to the wind, and no one will ever know. The CIA does not have to tell anyone about anything. If they don't like the president, they can kill him, as they did with President Kennedy, and then they don't have to answer the first question about their activities for any reason. So much for the people and the theoretical democracy they were and we are supposed to be living in. So why did they do it? Vietnam, pure and simple. J. Edgar Hoover, Allen Dulles, at least one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and top businessmen of the military-industrial complex wanted this war. And guess who refused to go to war there? That's right, President John F. Kennedy, the Commander-in-Chief. Add to that President Kennedy forcing Allen Dulles to retire and wanting to dismantle the CIA, and you have more than enough reason. The irony of the CIA's involvement in the assassination is that President Kennedy felt an organization like the CIA, one completely secret and allowed to kill anyone they wanted, was too dangerous to exist in a democracy. He was right. And there is another set of facts to look at. In those days, no one thought about serial killers, but today it is one of the first things we look for. So, if these guys were the killers I say they were, why didn't they kill others? Well, the sad news is that they did. The next one assassinated was Dr. Martin Luther King. The things in common with the JFK assassination? The lone gunman with a rifle. The rifle was discovered immediately after the shooting. The owner of the rifle was immediately identified and labeled the assassin, and a trial was never held. And the most damning connection? No one ever did any ballistic test on either of the rifles that established the link of the rifle and therefore its owner to the crime. How does someone arrest someone for killing a person with a weapon when no one has ever established that the weapon was the murder weapon? In the case of Dr. King, how does an attorney advise his client, James Earl Ray, to plead guilty to a crime when there is no link between the client's rifle and the crime? And why was Dr. King assassinated? Vietnam. Dr. King was coming out against the war, and since young black men were being drafted in excessive numbers relative to the population, his opposition, combined with his incredible influence, would have threatened the war effort. Add to that J. Edgar Hoover had carried out a vendetta against Dr. King for years, and it's not a stretch to add Dr. King to the list of men killed by the order of J. Edgar Hoover. And then there was the president's brother, Robert F. Kennedy, still called by many as Bobby Kennedy. A lone gunman fired the fatal shot to the head. This time there was a trial. The person convicted has never admitted to killing Bobby. There's a lot of controversy about what actually happened that night. And why kill Bobby Kennedy? Vietnam. He was running for president. If elected, he was going to stop the war in Vietnam. There is more, but none of it will fit into 15-minute snippets here on YouTube. I will release a book with much more detail next year. Oh, and by the way, did you ever see an interview or hear of these guys who were photographed on the roof of the Daltex building immediately after the assassination? I leave you with the known accomplishments of the CIA from its beginning to date. If after seeing this you think we need to change something about the CIA, well, it'll be up to you to do it. Good luck. In the 1950s, the CIA helped overthrow the revolutionary government of Iran in order to reinstate the Shah. They aided Fidel Castro in the overthrow of General Batista so Fidel could become the president of Cuba. The CIA, which was created to stop the spread of communism, helped install a communist government 90 miles from the U.S. In the 1960s, the CIA plotted and carried out the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba to overthrow Fidel Castro. They carried out coup after coup in South Vietnam to establish a government that would do what the CIA wanted, thus ensuring there would be no democracy in South Vietnam and help create popular support for the communists. The second time the CIA helped a country go communist. Overthrew Prince Sihanouk of Cambodia because he would not go to war with North Vietnam to stop the communists from taking war supplies to South Vietnam. The CIA replaced the Cambodian monarchy with a regime so corrupt that the Cambodian people allowed the radical communist Pol Pot to come to power. This is how the killing fields came about, not leaving Vietnam too soon as the Republican revisionists tried to fool everybody with during the last presidential election. This was the third time the CIA interference caused or helped cause a country to become communist. In the 1970s, the CIA sold arms to Iran to raise money to help the anti-communist cause in Central America. They did so because they didn't want to ask that pesky old Congress for money, since Congress had forbidden the military to intervene in Central America. In the 1980s, the CIA gave money, weapons, and training to Al-Qaeda and the Taliban to help defeat the communists of the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. Reminds me of that book by Mary Shelley. You know, Frankenstein? We created them, and since then, they have frequently tried to kill us. In the 1990s, the CIA did not foresee the complete collapse of communism in Eastern Europe and the breaking up of the Soviet Union, proving once again that the CIA, created to fight the communists, didn't have a clue about what was going on. And let me add, the communist regimes in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union collapsed without one bullet being fired, and not one person died. Who was it that sang "Give Peace a Chance"? In the 1990s, the CIA failed to detect or stop the terrorist attack on the U.S. military base in Lebanon. In 1993, the CIA failed to detect or stop the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. In the first decade of this century, the CIA failed to detect or stop the terrorist attack on the USS Cole. The CIA failed to detect or stop the terrorist attack on 9/11 on the World Trade Center. The CIA gave out completely false intelligence on the weapons of mass destruction. This started the war in Iraq, thus continuing to prove that the CIA has never had or will never have a clue about what's going on anywhere in the world. The CIA failed to tap the phones of known terrorists overseas in case they called into America to speak with an American citizen, thus causing President Bush to start the secret wiretapping of every phone of every American citizen in the United States just in case a known foreign terrorist called in to a U.S. citizen. Question: wouldn't it have been cheaper and completely lawful just to send a memo to the CIA requesting phone taps on known terrorists? And in the decade starting with 2010, the CIA continues to not know they should tap the phones of known terrorists overseas, so President Obama continues to tap the telephone of every American citizen on every call just in case one of the known terrorists overseas calls in to talk to an American citizen. But the most amazing thing about the CIA? While the president can't make a treaty with any country for anything, great or small, without the approval of Congress, the CIA can do anything it wants in any country it wants, including overthrowing any country's government and killing whoever they want, and they don't have to tell Congress anything, except, no, the Congress and the people they represent do not have the right to know what we do. Whatever happened to that whole Constitution thingy? Thanks for watching.